Presented by Horns and Hooves Entertainment, you're watching Bob Hansen, Sean O'Malley, Tom Ujak, and Adam Fitzgerald. You still up? Live. It's Buffalo After Dark.
All right, welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It's just only the two of us tonight. Got Tom, got Buffalo Bob over here. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
Hey, doing good. So it's been about 2 weeks since we've been on here, but I mean, unfortunately, our usual Sean and Adam ended up having a couple things come up. So you just got us tonight, but it's all good. So let's get right to it. The Hot Box, 49ers and the Bills. And of course, Bills look great on Monday Night Football this past week.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm very proud of the team in general. I mean, a lot of people, and you know what's really funny about this game in general, John? I don't know if you've been paying attention, but do you ever bet on like football games?
Yeah, I've done it before.
Okay. You ever noticed throughout the week they've been favoriting the 49ers as like 1.5 favorites against the Bills?
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm like, well, for one, I mean, how are the 49ers going to beat the Bills? I mean, granted, you got Debo and you have some semblance of a run game, but they couldn't even do anything on a run defense, especially when they had that fourth down stop on the goal line.
Yeah, I know that for sure. But, like, the 49ers in general are just so banged up at this point. Like, you can't even compete within the NFC West at this point. The Seahawks are good, but they're not as, like, superpower juggernauts that everybody thinks they are because the media fucking overhypes them. And then you have the Cardinals who fell off the map, if you noticed. And it's funny, too, like, the Bills went up the rise and the Cardinals went down after that Hail Mary game.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, literally the Bills got it together because when you look at what they did this past week, I mean, it just – everything came together. I mean, Josh Allen, great game. I mean, and especially with how he was able to control the pocket. Cole Beasley was outstanding, especially in the first half when you're going for over 100 yards in receiving yards. Diggs had another good game. But I definitely – that wide-open touchdown with Isaiah McKenzie and then the wide-open touchdown at the end to Gabriel Davis, I mean, those are just two beautiful plays. And then not even punt the ball at all until you were less than 4 minutes left in the entire game. I mean, Bjork has booted a good one on top of it. I mean, it was just everything that could go well went well.
Definitely. I wanted to punch Zach Moss in the face in the first quarter with then fumbling the ball at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, what was up with that?
I wanted to punch him in the face so bad for that. And I said, and I was screaming at the TV, and Brittany was with me, and she was like, "You're gonna lose this game, you stupid asshole!"
I know, right? And pretty much, I mean, the rest of it kind of talked to himself. Tyler Bass had another great game, so I mean, he's definitely turned around a little bit, and definitely not. I don't have as many concerns about him now as I did before.
I don't know. And you know what? I think he's really made some adjustments to his game. And for a rookie kicker, that's pretty damn good when you think about it. I mean, when you look back on it now I understand why the Bills got rid of Steven Hauschka.
Yeah. And, of course, now, I mean, Steven Hauschka, I mean, he decided to retire within the past week and hang it up. And, I mean, for him to retire after having a longer career, I mean, granted, Hauschka's done a lot of great things, but he just didn't have it in him anymore.
No, he didn't. And that's probably why the Bills drafted Bass to begin with. And I think if I remember correctly, if you look on Twitter for the Bills official account, I believe I saw this earlier today, and it said something like Tyler Bass has the most rookies points by any Bill ever in the history of the franchise.
Yeah, I mean, that says something. And then Josh Allen putting up franchise records on top of it. I mean, with the work he's been doing, I mean, he's just absolutely having a great year. And he ended up throwing for, over 400 yards again? I mean, beautiful.
Well, it was actually – yeah, it was something like 30 for 40 for 375 passing yards with 4 passing touchdowns with no interceptions.
Yeah. Oh, I loved having him on my one fantasy team this week. So, That was absolutely great to see that. And then, I mean, the fact that, I mean, in San Francisco, they can blame it as much as they want on not having like the home field advantage, especially with playing in Arizona. But guess what? I mean, even if you have a banged up quarterback and you have banged up players and you have people out because of the whole COVID thing, you still got to be able to show up and play. And San Francisco was not ready for what they ended up getting.
Not even the slightest. There were so many records in that game that I just couldn't keep up with it. And I want to talk about Cole Beasley because he had a monster game against the 49ers.
Awesome game.
Oh, absolutely. And ESPN, I took a screenshot of this for this video, and I wanted to share this to the public. For anybody who missed it, Cole Beasley is now the most all-time leader in touchdown receptions by players that are either 5'8" or shorter.
Yeah, and I mean that was a great thing that came out because I mean Beasley has been the answer in so many different ways, especially with what the Bills have been trying to do, and knowing that he's come on and he's turned into a great slot receiver. I mean, he has become a very reliable option for Josh Allen, and then of course you can put Stephon Diggs on the outside. You can run Gabriel Davis up on the outside as well. I mean, you've got some legitimate deep threats, and especially, of course, you have John Brown. So there's so many more weapons now that Allen has at his disposal that he can work with. The only thing I got to say is that the run game's got to get better because, I mean, with what we saw with Zach Brown, that was absolutely unacceptable. Zach Moss.
Yeah, Moss did not have a good game, and nobody saw him after that. But speaking of receivers, I have a theory of what's going to happen next. And a lot of Bills fans on here were probably not going to agree with me, but just bear with me here. And I firmly believe that because of Brown having a down year, and because they only signed a 3-year contract, I firmly believe that the Bills are going to cut him in the end of this year coming up. They're going to let him go to free agency. And don't get me wrong, he had great connections with Josh Allen. There's nothing wrong with what he had. But I feel the Bills, if they want to take that next step to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender within the next 3-4 years, and I'm very confident that they're going to be that case because of development from Josh Allen, because that's what it's always been. And I've said this now for the last few years, and you've heard me say it, is that I'm a firm believer in quarterbacks. And if you can develop a franchise quarterback, specifically who came out just as raw, and coming from a guy who said, don't take him, granted, my words, I think the Bills are going to take a free agent wide receiver. And when I say this, I'm talking about like Juju Smith-Schuster, Allen Robinson, or anybody like that. That's what I firmly believe if they were to cut ties with John Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we got some comments already that have come in, so I'm going to go over a few things. Anyone that's watching, of course, we are on Facebook Live. Feel free to give us some shout-outs, give us some love, ask us any questions. Feel free to give us some hate mail if you want to. And, of course, Luffy actually commented, even though he couldn't be on the show tonight. First thing he says to you, Bobby, he will not be ignored. Then he says, it's not an excuse for how short you are. Then he's calling you John Goodman with the receding hairline, and he's calling you a Rosen fan.
Listen, at least I have hair, unlike fucking Goodman.
Yeah. Well, plus you're not 80 years old either.
No, I'm not. I'm not 42 either.
Right. Yeah, but of course, I mean, and he'll be back on probably next week, so that'll be good.
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, he just wanted to get some stuff in there. And then, of course, I think Papa Giorgio ends up commenting earlier during the week. He's like, well, send us the link. And he's actually somebody I worked with in a previous job. I'm like, Nick, I sent you the link. Here you go. Go ahead and throw it on for a little bit.
Wait, did you just send it to him just now?
Then I sent it to him like earlier. And then I tagged him in the comment feed too. So
oh, okay.
You should get it.
Oh. Yeah.
And then Luffy says he's the undisputed star of the show.
Oh yeah, of course he is. He's the star everywhere he goes. Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about with Josh Allen is this, and again, I've been busy with when they show graphics on the show throughout the game. I just kept catching evidence of shit like this. One I saw that was very interesting, and this is something Jim Kelly's never done, and it's this. Josh Allen is the first ever Bills quarterback with an 80% completion percentage rating and 4 touchdown passes in a single game.
That is insane. I mean, and here he is, Josh Allen. He's coming out. He's breaking records. He is getting it done, and he has progressed so well between year 1 and year 3. And Josh Allen already has experience in the playoffs, as we saw last year. The thing that I really like about him, he's really cleaned up a lot of what the issues were initially. Well, plus, of course, Brandon Beane actually got him a ton of help on the offensive line, which is good because now he can actually develop and learn how to read the different schemes that are out there. That part is great. But actually, here's another thing I want to throw in there from earlier this week also. So I was reading through some different sites, such as Sports Illustrated, and also going through Pro Football Talk and some of the different sites. And one of the typical people that comments still thinks that Josh Allen is not the real deal. And he thinks that Mayfield is better than Josh Allen any day of the week and will be in his career. I'm like, okay, what's Baker Mayfield done? He's helped turn it around in Cleveland, but he's got way more interceptions than Josh Allen. His quarterback rating is worse than Josh Allen. I mean, his overall win percentage is worse than Josh Allen. But yet, according to some of the pundits, he's still better than Josh Allen. I'm like, okay, well, Cleveland, yeah, they're actually winning finally. But Baker Mayfield is not better than Josh Allen right now.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I'm not the biggest Baker Mayfield fan. I will admit that. And he was one of the few guys I wanted the Bills to take if he were available. But obviously they ended up with Allen. But here's my argument. Baker Mayfield had all the talent around him when he was playing in Oklahoma. And then when he went to the NFL, the Browns gave him too many weapons, and he wasn't unable to succeed. And then OBJ gets injured, and all of a sudden now the Browns are a 93 playoff team. Baker, to me, is more overrated than anybody in that draft class. I would say in order, it would probably be Allen, Jackson, Mayfield, Darnold, and then Rosen in that order for me.
Oh, yeah. And Josh Rosen is now relegated to that practice squad in Miami, which is pretty pathetic.
Actually, he's on the Buccaneers.
Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, that's all right. Oh, and here's another thing, too, I want to talk about. Josh Allen is the first ever player in Bills history to be named the Offensive Player of the Week 3 times in one season.
Yeah, and that says something. It's not even Jim Kelly could do that.
No, but the question is, if the Bills were to win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen, and this is for everybody watching the show, and put it in the comment section. I really want to know what your answer is. Do you guys firmly believe, and Tom, you can answer this too, do you firmly believe that if the Bills win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen in this crew, do you think personally he will be remembered more than Jim Kelly? What do you think?
There you go. All right, so the comment is up in there, so anyone who wants to jump in, by all means, feel free. Here's the thing. Jim Kelly is known so well in Buffalo. I mean, he did a lot of great things over the years here. He took us to 4 straight Super Bowls. Granted, we lost all 4 straight Super Bowls, but he led the team through a period where literally we were the dominant force in the AFC for a lot of years. It's similar to what Bill Belichick was with the New England Patriots up until this past year. Basically, once they had the hot QB, they went through and they totally annihilated everybody. And the Bills did that. One of the games I actually remember that Jim Kelly would be remembered for is there was a game against the Oakland Raiders, and this was back in the early 90s.
AFC Championship game, right?
Yeah. Well, there was that, but here's the interesting thing about it. Besides the championship game, the Bills on offense, and I remember Chuck Dickerson talked about this on WGR back in the day. They only ran 4 different plays on their scheme all day long. 4 plays. And the Raiders still couldn't figure out a way to beat them.
Well, I wasn't alive then, so I can't say. I don't really have an opinion on that. But I can certainly see why they blew them out 51-3 in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and they only ran 4 plays. Like the Bills. I mean, they basically had 3 pass plays and a run scheme. That's all they ran. And what happens is that the Bills still destroyed them 51-3. And the only thing they did out of those 4 plays was just change and shift some of the formations. But it was basically the same 4 damn plays. And I'm like, you never see that happening. So that was pretty special. I would honestly have to say, though, if Josh Allen wins a Super Bowl, I don't think it would be just one. I think that there could be more.
I think so. I agree with you.
I think he will be remembered just as much as Jim Kelly. I don't know if it'll be more, but he will be on that same playing field with Jim Kelly. And actually, to an extent, if he does win a Super Bowl, his legacy might one-up Jim Kelly on that.
I think so, too, because I think, to be fair, I have this argument a lot with a lot of people, and this is not just from the perspective of a sports fan. This is just the perspective of any sport in general. Like, here's a really interesting topic. Think of it like this. Like, when you think of the – I'm trying to think here for a minute. Just give me a second. Okay. Think of when the Washington Capitals went to the Stanley Cup Finals back in 1998, okay, when they got swept by the Red Wings. The Capitals were a very good team that year. Obviously, they took out a good handful of teams, including Buffalo. Mm-hmm. But they had a really good squad of players. You know, they had Peter Bondra, Sergei Gonchar, Chris Simon, Olaf Kolzig, Kalle Johansson. I think Phil Housley was on that team. I mean, the Washington Capitals were stacked.
Yeah.
But they were not good enough.
He was a goalie at that time, too. He was in his peak.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But if you compare to when the Washington Capitals went to the Cup Final in '98 compared to what they did 20 years later, 20 years later, they go to the Stanley Cup again, and they beat the Vegas Golden Knights, and they win the Stanley Cup. And a lot of people, Caps fans in specific, are telling me, because I know a good handful of Caps fans, they're all telling me that that the 2018 Washington Capitals is completely tarnished all the past failures from the Capitals from 1998. It's completely done. It's irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people firmly think that with Alex Ovechkin on the roster and Nick Backstrom, Brayton Holtby, you know everybody on the Washington Capitals. But, like, those guys in general all won a cup. They've cemented their name in history to the point where it's like everybody can remember them.
Yeah.
So, and I think because what's going on here with the Buffalo Bills is even though they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row, if the Bills make the Super Bowl with Josh Allen, because let's face it, the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to win it every year. We all know that. To the point where it's like everybody can win.
Yeah, a little bit of feedback there. Yeah, but totally, I absolutely get your point on that. And I think a lot of what will happen on this is that if Josh Allen gets that win, I mean, this team will definitely be remembered. And I think in a lot of ways, it can definitely it takes away the pain of the 4 Super Bowl losses, basically.
Well, like I said, it's all just in favor of who wins the championship. Because you could bring up the Stanley Cup. Like, here's another good example. Mario Lemieux and Sidney Crosby. Mario Lemieux won 2 Stanley Cups with the Penguins in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Sidney Crosby won 3 more. So the question in Pittsburgh Penguins fans' minds is, who's going to be a more memorable player, Sidney Crosby or Mario Lemieux?
Right. And, I mean, Mario Lemieux, he's loved in Pittsburgh, but I'll tell you, Sidney Crosby's right up there with him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's only a matter of time before Bills fans figure out that if they win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen, he might very well dethrone Jim Kelly is arguably the greatest Bill of all time, next to Bruce Smith and all these other icons.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually got a couple more comments here too. So basically, So Luffy told you to go F yourself. That was the first thing. Then basically after that, Luffy is basically saying that Josh Allen's just a better version of Cam Newton. Hannah Lavello says hi, so we'll say hi back to her. And Luffy is also saying Mario Lemieux has a better legacy than Sidney Crosby.
Maybe. I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and I can't debate that.
Right. There's some.
But go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that people can look at it, and I mean, and each will have their own legacy for sure. I mean, can we look at how the eras are totally different between one team and another? I mean, certainly, we can. I mean, and I will say the NFL back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was much more of a smash mouth league compared to what it is now. I mean, there was people that were, way more involved in terms of getting hurt. And I mean, it was just, I think there was much more of a physicality at that time. And it is what it is. But I mean, we can't discount, what the teams are doing now. And actually, and Luffy ends up saying the other thing about Mario is how he came back from cancer, which I give him a lot of credit. He played really damn good after coming back from that.
Oh, absolutely! I remember that game.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Pittsburgh twice to watch hockey games down there. One in the old Igloo, and I've seen one at PPG Arena down there. I mean, and they actually have the Mario Lemieux statue right outside the main gate.
Well, of course they have a Mario Lemieux statue outside. I mean,
yeah.
But do you think? But I mean, Penguins fans are loyal regardless. But it's just a very interesting status quo that I'm asking this question, because there are people out there who firmly believe that once you win a championship for no matter what team or in any sport for that matter, they always will defy their franchise forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Ryan ended up jumping on as well too. He said he's actually going to come on the show for a little bit. So yeah, whenever you want to come on, Ryan, you're more welcome to.
Yeah.
So.
And regarding to Adam's comment about Cam Newton, I got this stat as well on ESPN on Monday Night Football. As I was talking to Adam throughout the game about this, and he was just telling me how good Josh Allen is. And we talk about this all the time because he's like, dude, Josh Allen's amazing. I fucking love that guy. He's amazing, blah, blah, blah. So I give him a lot of credit for being right about one thing that I wasn't. So anyway, the stat is that in the first 40 games in NFL history, only 2 quarterbacks were able to accomplish 50 passing touchdown passes and 20 rushing touchdowns and 50 passing touchdowns. And only 2 QBs in NFL history were ever able to do this: Cam Newton and Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean that's elite territory right there.
Well, yeah, I think Josh Allen he's not there yet. I mean, he's an elite quarterback, but he's not at the point. He's not at the Patrick Mahomes status yet. Just like I said, the key word is yet, because I think the more times he plays and the team they built around him, the better the odds. Because like I said earlier, the Chiefs are not going to win the Super Bowl every year. So new teams are going to come about, and I think Buffalo is going to be a team that a lot of people are going to be talking about come playoff time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and he is definitely getting there. I mean, Josh Allen is very close to being in that elite status right now. He is very, very close. The numbers he's putting up are absolutely great. I mean, there's no question on that. His QB ratings have been great. His accuracy has gone up tenfold since he came into the league. And I just absolutely love the things that he's been able to do. Now, you look at Mahomes. Mahomes is just a whole different beast right there. I mean,
Mahomes is a different machine compared to those two.
Absolutely. I mean, he was just straight up elite right off the bat, and you win your Super Bowl in year 2. And I mean, which I will say, I'm glad that Andy Reid finally got a Super Bowl, because that dude deserved it. I mean, I have a lot of respect for everything he's done with the Eagles over the years, and same thing with the Chiefs now over the last 8. But I mean, Allen is getting there, so absolutely,
Absolutely.
Hey, what's going on, Ryan?
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, not much. So you got Ryan Coggill, Broviet Sports. How's it going?
Oh man, another day, another dollar. You know what I mean? Enjoying some of the snow that's up here now. Well, personally, I'm enjoying the snow. Big Buffalo Bills. First of the primetime December wins. So hopefully, knock on wood, we get 3 more. So.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit about the game. Also, what are your thoughts on what we saw on Monday night?
I think that's the most that I've ever cheered and been excited to see the Bills in honestly all 22 years that I've lived of my life so far. I think there were a lot of times I definitely did feel different about the game, because there were a lot of times, usually you're used to seeing the play unfold as you go, but there were a lot of times like the throw to McKenzie. We couldn't see the end zone. It was such a long throw. I think they were about like the 50 or on the San Francisco 40, where you didn't see the end zone. So you had no idea that McKenzie was really open until, the camera panned over to him and he just walked into the end zone. So there are definitely a lot of awesome moments that I'm hoping continue over next week in Pittsburgh. As some of the viewers may know, I lived in Pennsylvania for the last 4 years before moving back up here last spring because of COVID, back up to Buffalo. So I definitely have a lot of Steelers rivalry and positive rivalries that are going to be tested this upcoming Sunday. So hopefully last week rolls over into Sunday and then obviously into the next couple of primetime games and then that final Miami game when they come up here to the frozen tundra and should be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm probably looking forward to that game the most, the Bills-Steelers game, besides the playoffs, obviously. But, like, I would probably say I'm the most excited about this game because I have a lot of good friends of mine who are Steelers fans, and they're all just excited for this game because they've acknowledged, this is going to be one of the better games on SNF this year. Because a lot of the matchups they've had this year have been god-awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a few times during Sunday Night Football this year I've actually fallen asleep because the game's so damn boring. I mean, the matchups really have not been that great this year. So the fact that now we're going to actually have a Pittsburgh versus Buffalo matchup where you have two good defenses and you have two good offenses, and, I mean, there's a lot of comparables between Roethlisberger and Allen. I mean, it should make for a very, very interesting matchup. I'm really looking forward to it. It's actually one of the games I've been looking forward to all season.
Absolutely. And you know what? I am one of the few people that have said this before, is don't let the media hype you, because I firmly believe that the Bills are going to beat the Steelers. And if the Washington no-names can beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, then I think the Buffalo Bills could do the same thing.
Yeah, that was another shocker from this Sunday. How the hell did the Washington football team come through and beat Pittsburgh?
You're willing.
So here's the thing about Pittsburgh, and this is the thing that we definitely have to be careful of as Bills fans going into this. Pittsburgh tends to play down or up to whatever the competition is that they're playing against. And that gets them into close games. I mean, we saw all season they could have lost. They could have had their first loss of the season to the Cowboys. They only lost to the Cowboys the first half of that game. Dallas was in the lead before Pittsburgh started picking up in the second half of that game. So they've won a lot of close games. They've squeaked by. Obviously, the Washington game not being any different, it was tied for the longest time. So, we just have to be careful because they will play to whatever the talent is, whatever the talent level is of the team that they're against, and that can either be a strength or a weakness depending on how Pittsburgh decides to leverage that. And seeing as Mike Tomlin is one of the smartest and best coaches in the National Football League, and they do have talent on that team, I do expect it to be a close game. I do expect it to be a tough game because Pittsburgh is one of those teams where you have to grind out against them. And they do have some talent, but there's also the other side of it where they don't really have an established running game. Ben has the potential to get injured at any point in time during a game or during a season. And their defense is strong, but not as strong without Bud Dupree, who's out for the season. And so it really falls on Minkah Fitzpatrick's shoulders on defense. So really the thing we're going to have to watch out for are their receivers. Chase Claypool has had an amazing rookie year. Juju Smith-Schuster, obviously, number one wide receiver threat as well. Eric Ebron as a tight end can be a threat for them as well. So we just have to pay attention and be careful mainly to their wide receivers.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, Claypool, what a hell of a season he's been having. Great season for him.
Yeah, I'm so lucky.
I'm assuming that he's in the running, if not the presumed winner of the Offensive Player of the Year award. He's had an amazing rookie year.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised.
Sorry, rookie Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be an honor well deserved for him. We got a couple more comments that came in. So basically, with what we have, and actually we have a Sabres comment on here too. So of course, Luffy said Allen's more accurate than Newton. That's up on Newton. Then he asked us this question: why is everyone on the show bald? Shut up, Luffy.
I don't know.
Then he said Steelers are slow starters, and then from the Bills' last game, your run game is non-existent. Okay, and then Hannah actually asked the question, are fans going to be allowed for Sabres games this short season? Any guesses? My guess is no.
No, I don't think so for right now. I did read the Florida Panthers were the first arena to approve fans to go to attendances at games.
Yeah, I'm gonna assume that for Sabres games they're not. Obviously, this has little, if probably no effect on it, but the ECHL affiliate for the Sabres ended up canceling or opting out of the ECHL season, the Cincinnati Cyclones. Obviously, Rochester didn't play for the majority of whatever games were left in the NHL season last year, so we ended up not having an AHL farm team to rely on at that time. The Sabres, as far as I know, didn't lend anybody to any overseas teams that they can get back. Obviously, Pilot not included in that deal. So I'm not entirely sure, but I'm assuming because parts and pieces of the organization are opting out of seasons or out of the season, and or probably if the AHL does play, they probably won't allow fans either. So I'm assuming that the Sabres won't.
Well, I mean, I know that Jack Quinn and Dylan Cousins were both loaned to play for Team Canada in the World Juniors, which is coming up very soon. So I'm actually looking forward to actually watching the World Juniors because, let's face it, there has not been any hockey since the end of November. I mean, what am I talking about? Since the end of September. That's what I meant to say, not October or November. September.
I'm assuming if any people are allowed into the arena to watch, it'll be season ticket holders. Or, like we can see something like the Green Bay Packers are doing in the NFL where it's just employees' family, like immediately like their household family can be allowed into the stadium in Green Bay. So I'm assuming we might see some variation of that because, I just saw articles on this today. Did the Sabres take like a $10.9 million hit just last year? So obviously the NHL is not a financially critical league. It's not like the NFL. So they're going to take a financial hit. So I'm assuming if anything happens, it's going to be either season ticket holders or employees and their families.
Yeah, but the problem with the Sabres is that a lot of their financing comes from advertisements locally. Like when you think about, forget jersey sales, forget advertisements. When you look at the Sabres, a lot of their sponsorships are mostly within their banks, like Key Bank, HSBC Arena, Marine Midland Arena, all these things. They're all sponsorships within that. And if there's no income from fans going to the games or buying food tickets, etc., then the Sabres financially can't mainstream what they got going for them. I mean, they have Jack Eichel, sure, but it's not going to be enough to lure the fans over. Because I was reading earlier on Forbes.com, and they do this every year anyway. So going into 2021, the most valuable franchise going into the upcoming campaign are the New York Rangers. I mean, and 5 of the original 6 are in the top 10. So the Red Wings are just outside of it. But the Rangers are the most valuable team in Forbes.com, according to the NHL.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens because I know there's been some talk about when the actual season is going to be starting, and I know, Bobby, you had some in the pre-show when we were talking before we went live. I know you had mentioned you had some different news about what they're looking at for this season and how things are going to play out. So definitely feel free to tell the fans about it.
I mean, I'd rather tell it either way. But until then, the Board of Governors meeting is, I believe, tomorrow at 4 o'clock. So what they're going to do here is they're going to approve the season, and it's going to be a 56-game regular season, and there's a temporary realignment for the NHL for within the division. But one thing we know for a fact is that the season is going to start on January 13th, and teams that did not qualify to make the playoffs, like Buffalo, those teams will start practicing 2 days after Christmas. And then the teams that made the playoffs will start on New Year's Day. And then they'll start doing all that. There's no preseason. There's no none of that. And they're just going to go straight to the point. And for what it is, January 13th is the primary goal. And then have the season end in July. And then have the expansion draft in late July and then have them play in October in 21-22. That's the goal, to get them ready for UBS Arena, one of the Islanders, which I'm looking to go to, and, of course, the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, awesome. And it'll be nice finally, like, kind of getting back to semblance of normal, with how the sports seasons are going to be. Because, I mean, this whole year, 2020, I mean, everything that could have gone wrong with sports did go wrong. I mean, anything in general that could have gone wrong went wrong. But it'll just be nice to finally have some hockey, like, more hockey news to talk about, and just be able to even talk more baseball as well. I mean, there's so many different things we could talk about. And actually, one of the things that came up, and Ryan, I'll get you to chime in a moment. I know we're going to talk about some Yankees trade news that you had too. But Ryan, before we jump into that, any thoughts on what we were talking about with hockey season?
No, just that, I mean, obviously the question when the season was cut short last year, and then they had the playoffs that they kind of rigged together, was how do you get back on a regular schedule, right? Because the NHL season is well over 100 games between the preseason, the actual season, and then the playoffs. So you're playing well over 100 games if you're making it into the playoffs. So the question was, how do we get back on a normal hockey schedule as it is right now? Personally, I'm not a fan of the 82 game schedule. I think that we can, in fact, limit it and still have good hockey and still have a good hockey season each year. But putting that besides the point, I think that that's the only plan that you can really put together, unless you just cancel an entire year. Just to say, like, hey, like the plan that they're putting together now, just don't play hockey for a year and then come back for the 21-22 season. But that's obviously not going to happen.
No.
So you would have, this is really the only way that they can go about it. Now, again, that's in a perfect world. We're seeing an uptick in COVID cases right now, just because there's a new strain that's going around with a gene mutation. So that's why there's an uptick in COVID cases. But as long as nothing happens, as long as games don't get canceled, as long as nothing moves, we should be good. Now, that is, again, though, up to the teams. That is up to the individuals that are on those teams to follow whatever protocols get put in place, because we've seen what can happen in the NFL if literally one person does not follow protocol. And it doesn't even have to be a person on that team. For Baltimore, it was somebody who was not a player, was a staff member that brought brought COVID into the Baltimore Ravens locker room and ended up with, I think, almost over 20 something, almost the entire defense and like half the offense on the COVID-19 reserve list. So as long as they follow protocols and as long as everybody tries to keep as healthy as possible, we should have a good hockey season. But again, how that unfolds depends on how well that plan plays out.
Well, if they want to just do that, you may as well just follow the protocols that they did throughout the summer for the playoffs, and nobody got tested positive throughout the entire 2 months that the NHL put on the surface, if you remember. And they had a bubble in Edmonton and in Toronto, and they moved the conference finals and the Stanley Cup to Edmonton, so they were able to play those games like it was normal. And to be honest, it was exciting what they were able to do. And it's one of those rare occasions where hockey was being played in the summer, which was awesome. Don't get me wrong. It was a really cool experience to see all that. But if the NHL just follows exactly what they did just nearly 6 months ago, they'll be fine. That's just perspectively.
Yeah. The only problem with that is, though, again, how many people were pretty close to losing their minds by the time, how many of those players were close to losing their minds by the time that they got out there. So between what I'm assuming that they're not going to jump directly into a season, that there would be preseason games, maybe. I don't know, Bobby, if you heard anything about that.
Well, I already mentioned that there's not going to be any preseason games. But what I know for a fact, and I've read this for a while, is the NHL wants to do not just one arena. They want to do at least a rotation of 5 bubble areas. So, like, here's a good example. The San Jose Sharks are not allowed to have training camp in California due to the protocols that's going on right now. And to be honest with you, I don't even want to talk about California. But the fact remains is like they're doing exactly what the 49ers are doing. Is they're going to have to – if they're going to have training camp around that time, because they won't be back in San Jose until after Christmas. And if they are to have training camp in San Jose, they're going to have to go to a small facility until after this 3-week lockdown, whatever the hell is going on over there. And then once they come back, they'll have the full formation. But as far as your plan goes for having to do the bubbles,
rotation.
I've heard a few candidates are in the works as a potential suitor for games, to like rotate, because the rule obligation is that the NHL wants to set up the schedule to be like Major League Baseball, where teams within the same division will play 3 days straight or have a bye in between those days. Like, it would be like, let's say, for example, Carolina versus Chicago. And because I'm going to go over that in a little bit. So Chicago, Carolina, they'll play one game, they'll have a day off, and then they'll play 2 more after that. Then they'll fly over to the next bubble of that team, play in that same bubble with another team like Nashville, and do the same thing again, and then fly over to another city. So they're going to go into a complete circle with some of these rotations. So if they're going to have games in Buffalo, which I've heard they could do, I've also heard Florida, I've also heard Chicago. Those are 3 cities I've heard thus far that could be in play as a rotation for bubble for the season to go as it's projected to be. And then all of the Canadian teams will be within the same division. And if I remember correctly, they're all going to stay in Canada.
Yeah, because there's an issue between crossing borders, which will be interesting to see how that plays out at the end once we hit the playoffs, because I'm assuming that they would then have to figure out a way for teams to cross borders at that point. But yeah, so I mean, still, I do like that plan, but I mean, between the NBA and then the NHL, we did hear a lot of negative things about the bubble. So
yeah,
I mean, which trickled over to the NFL, where the players specifically said that they would not be doing a bubble by any means necessary. And then Goodell came out and said that the NFL isn't interested in doing one. Whether he stays true to that or not is obviously remains to be seen. But that being said, obviously, it really depends on how the teams do with sticking with protocol, as well as the staff members.
Right, but the thing is that even though the NFL has said that they may not do a bubble, I've heard they might. Because in fact, I think if there's a location for what they can do for COVID, one proposal I've heard, or at least one idea that they came up with, is they're going to put 2 stadiums within one conference. So let's say, for example, all of the NFC teams will go to Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and then all the AFC teams will go to like another indoor stadium like Houston or something like that to play their games in the playoffs. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was the original plan, was to put all of the teams in a bubble for the playoffs and then have the Super Bowl in Tampa, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I haven't heard any of that. In fact, I've heard the complete opposite of that, because there are so many people that are associated with an NFL team versus most other major league sports. I mean, you're talking about 53 people on the roster itself, not taking into account the GMs that travel with the team, the coaches, the coaching staff, the support staff, and stuff like that. That's well over thousands of people that they're going to have to find and pay for hotel rooms for whatever the amount of time is. So I think the main challenge is logistically on the NFL and the team side. And I know just from the player side, the players are not happy with the idea of a bubble. I don't know if you guys watch the Pat McAfee show that often.
I've heard that, yeah.
I absolutely love that. I watch every day of the week, and he has Aaron Rodgers does an hour segment on Tuesdays. It's Aaron Rodgers Tuesday, and Aaron Rodgers said that the NFLPA is not a fan of the bubble and would not support going to a bubble. And so obviously we all know how powerful the NFLPA can be from time to time. So like I said, it'll be interesting. I didn't hear anything that you had said, Bobby, but I'll definitely have to look into that a little bit more, because it would be interesting to see if they could actually pull that off. Again, I think it's an issue of logistics on the NFL and the team side, and just an issue of not wanting to do it on the player side. But if they could somehow come to some sort of an understanding, I think that would be cool to see if the NFL could pull it off.
Absolutely. And what I want to do too now is I want to show you guys what they call the proposed 2021 NHL division realignment. And to be honest with you, I actually like this division a lot better than we currently have right now, because they changed this division. Well, they changed the conferences within every 10 years, if you ever noticed that. And because now the Kraken are coming in the fall, they're going to have to probably change it to what it is now. You know what I'm saying? So the proposed deal is there are 4 divisional teams. And there's a Canadian division, and then there's a bunch of teams that have been pulled out from the East, put into the West, and then from the West to the East. You get the idea.
Yep.
So
and here's the hosting to you too. So if you have any screenshots you want to share of all that, you can.
Yeah, you can put it up on the screen if you want, so that you get a better understanding of it. So so for anybody who hasn't heard this yet, one division that we've heard clearly, and it's pretty much confirmed, it's a lock, are the Canadian teams. So Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver are all in one division going forward for the upcoming NHL season. And then you have Boston, Buffalo, New Jersey, the New York Islanders, and the New York Rangers, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Washington all in the same division. And then this is the part where I was talking about earlier about how they pulled some teams out of the West, and then from the West to the East and the East to the West. This is exactly what I was talking about.
Actually,
Carolina.
Yeah, when you mention that too, can you switch the hosting back to me? So I'll do, because it's not letting me do the screen share without.
Oh yeah, so I'm just gonna tell it as it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the team is Carolina, Chicago, Columbus, Detroit, Florida, Minnesota, Nashville, and Tampa Bay. And then the last division is Anaheim, Arizona, Colorado, Dallas, Los Angeles, San Jose, St. Louis, and Las Vegas.
That's an interesting realignment, because I would have never thought in a million years that basically the Blues would be out west like that. I never thought about that. Now, is it going to make for some interesting matchups? Absolutely, because the fact that now you have the Canadian division, that's going to be pretty neat. There really isn't too much difference with the division that the Sabres are in, because a lot of those same teams are all metropolitan teams, so we all know that. But the thing that gets interesting, though, is that St. Louis and Chicago being in different spots, that'll get a little bit interesting, and we're not going to see as many battles as we would probably, but I definitely do like that Nashville and Tampa are in the same division, because those two teams have a pretty good rivalry going on. And then, of course, even Nashville and Detroit, they've had some pretty decent rivalries, same with them in Chicago. So, there's definitely a good possibility of some nice matchups there. There absolutely will be. I'm interested to see how the West plays out, though.
Yeah, the West is going to be interesting because, again, St. Louis got picked up. Because St. Louis got picked out by the NHL. So, basically, again, they just mismatched a few teams within the crap divisions that they've had for the last few years. And I'm not a big fan of the Atlantic Division, because most of the teams that are in that division are really good, and the majority of those teams in there are from within the northern region. So, I think, personally, the one that they came up with today with Buffalo, Boston, and the Islanders and the Rangers and all that to me makes more sense, because if you think about it geographically, Buffalo is in New York State, and then you have to be in the same division with the Islanders and the Rangers. So right there just solidifies that whole division for me down the road. And I think if they're serious, they should really consider that division as a top-notch division going forward. And I actually really like that idea.
Yeah, and
it's almost like
Oh, go ahead, Ren.
I was just going to say that's almost like turning around and saying, okay, we're going to realign the NFL divisions, and now Buffalo is going to play with Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and New England, just because geographically New England is close to us. There's nobody north of them. Pittsburgh's only 4 hours away from us. Cleveland's only 3 hours away from us. So it's easy to. It would almost be like turning around and saying the exact same thing. It really does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely like, and to your guys' point also, I mean, I definitely like what's happened, especially with the Atlantic, how you have the Bruins and the Sabres in the same division, and of course you have the Devils, you have all the tri-state teams. So you have the Devils, the Islanders, the Rangers. I mean, I love that Philly and Pittsburgh are going to stay together, so they'll be having some great rivalry games there. And then, of course, we know that the Flyers and the Pens hate the Capitals, so there's a good rivalry right there. So there's going to be some really good games out of that division. That division was definitely thought out.
Yeah, I really, like I said, this is probably my favorite division among the realignment. My least favorite is the one that I talked about earlier with Carolina, Chicago, Columbus, because to me, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, the Canadian one makes a lot of sense, even though everybody's kind of mishmashed with an east-west, by globally, they're in different regions of Canada, but it makes sense because you exclusively put all of the Canadian teams in one place. And then, I mean, it's just so interesting how they put this together as far as a realignment is concerned. But if I'm the NHL going down to 21-22, the only realignment change is with the Coyotes moving out of the Pacific Division to make room for Seattle, and then moving down to the Central Division to play with teams like Dallas and Chicago, Nashville, St. Louis, etc. But again, there's so much in play with these divisions that you can almost make them the current alignment to what it's supposed to be. Because again, that Buffalo, New York, Boston, DC, and Pennsylvania division, whatever it's going to be called, I guess, or whatever it's going to be named, that division alone, it makes too much sense to really not put them in this situation.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. 100% agree. Hey, Ryan, any thoughts before we transition into the next spot?
No,
I'm good.
I have nothing else to add. Like Bobby said, I mean, except for the one with Carolina and Columbus and Chicago, I mean, the rest of them pretty much make sense geographically, which I think obviously would be the goal here. You want teams traveling as least as possible. Like, you don't want them traveling that far, and you don't want them traveling that often. So obviously geographically they all make sense, except for the one where you're jumping from Chicago down to Columbus, down to Carolina. And then obviously Canada having as few teams as it does, you kind of have to group all of the Canadian ones in because they're on that side of the border. So yeah, I really have nothing else to add.
Okay. Great. Now, what we'll do is we'll get into a little bit of baseball news because one of the big things that came out were some trade speculations and some trade rumors with the New York Yankees today. So, Bobby, go ahead and take it for us.
With the New York Yankees, according to our buddy Brian Trader, he told ourselves in a group chat called the War Room, which is with all of our buddies from our NHL Fans 365 days. He said there was a report that the Pittsburgh Pirates and the New York Yankees are discussing a trade that would send Jameson Taillon and Josh Bell to the New York Yankees. But he didn't say who the Pirates would get in return for him.
Interesting move. Pirates keep cleaning out.
But it's not really accurate because the Pirates would not give up either one of them. They're both very valuable pieces. The only problem with Taillon is that he's always hurt. That's the only problem I have with him.
That's true. Yeah, one of the biggest things I can tell you about the Pirates, and Ryan, you might be able to attest to this because I know you were living down in Pennsylvania for 4 years. The Pittsburgh Pirates in Pittsburgh, basically, their city thinks that the Pirates are irrelevant right now because their ownership has been too cheap. They haven't been investing in the team. After they had a couple good playoff runs, of course, they ended up firing their GM. And basically now Pittsburgh really hasn't had a whole lot to show in the last several years.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, you guys know I'm not a huge baseball person. Not really a huge fan of baseball. I definitely want to try getting into it more here in the future. But
pick the goddamn Mets while you're at it.
From a cultural standpoint, in Pennsylvania, I was in North Central, so I was middle of the state. So it was always Eagles, Steelers. It was like there was always a split. Penguins, Flyers. So there was always a split. But culturally, I mean, Pennsylvania is baseball. The Little League World Series is right where I went to college. It's a huge thing. I would have to say, from a cultural standpoint, that minor league baseball was probably more beloved and invested in the Commonwealth than the Pirates have been. There were some people that I know that were fans of the Pirates, but it seemed like that was more of I'm from Pennsylvania, and this is, the professional baseball team that I've chosen to support. But I also know that minor league baseball was just as supported. I think the Williamsport Crosscutters was the minor league team in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where I was going to college. And the stands were always packed. They were always full. Like I said, Little League World Series was there. So I think it's more of a culture thing than it is an actual baseball fan support thing. I could be completely wrong, but just from what I had seen, that's what I can report on.
Yeah, there's a lot of huge baseball fans, specifically in Philadelphia with the Phillies. So there's a lot of tension that runs very high every year with the Phillies. I mean, ever since they got Bryce Harper, they've been going queer for a World Series. So, I mean, it's not to say I hate the Phillies. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, when you get one of the best baseball players in the world to come play for the Philadelphia Phillies, chances are very high that you're going to be guaranteed the bound, at least, to go to the World Series. So
yeah, absolutely. If at the very least, a very deep playoff run.
Oh, speaking of deep playoff run, there's a report that I wanted to share earlier today, and I keep forgetting about it, is the New York Mets. Obviously, we talked about this on the show before, at least a month ago, was Stephen Cohen became the new owner of the New York Mets, and he said that he was looking to make a big splash. And believe it or not, I follow him on Twitter. So he has all the inside information, obviously, because he's the goddamn owner. So the Mets, apparently, according to Andy Martino, who's an insider for MLB Network, he's reporting the New York Mets are looking to adding not one, but two superstars. They're looking to add Trevor Bauer, who's one of the biggest names out there from the Cincinnati Reds. He's available in the free agent market, and the New York Mets have a lot of interest, and mutual interest, to say. But the one that I think a lot of Mets fans are pretty much embracing at this point because, well, they're talking, and nothing has come in set in stone, but it's leading towards that direction, is former World Series MVP George Springer is expected to sign with the New York Mets from the Houston Astros.
Big upgrade. Big upgrade.
Oh, that's a huge upgrade. Imagine if they get Bauer and Springer. Dude, the Mets would be an
playoff run immediately.
I mean, think about that rotation. I mean, you have Jacob deGrom. You have Steven Matz, you have Noah Syndergaard, then you have Marcus Stroman, and then you add Trevor Bauer to that rotation. Holy hell.
That's a sick rotation.
Oh, my God. Could you imagine? That's almost as good as what the Phillies have right now. And it's so embarrassing about the Phillies that if you remember from last winter, the Phillies gave Blake Wheeler a shit ton of money. I think it was like 5 years, $18 million or something like that. $18 million per year for 5 years. And it's so bad right now, the Phillies are looking to trade him.
Wow.
Yeah, that's to me is like the ultimate fuck up. But if we're talking about pitchers, Lance Lynn got traded from the Texas Rangers to the Chicago White Sox on Monday night, right after the Bills win.
Yeah, that was just insane to see that right off the bat.
Yeah. Oh, and Adam Eaton went back to the White Sox. I'm telling you, man, the White Sox are no joke. They're really trying their best to build a team around Jose Abreu.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, it's a sleeper team right now. I mean, they're quietly putting in some good pieces.
And you know what? And they have Tony La Russa, who's one of the best managers of all time, back on the mound to be the manager of the White Sox next year. I'm telling you, the Chicago White Sox are really making an impact with their team next year. And then bringing in Lance Lynn and then building around Jose Abreu, I think really just solidifies to what they're trying to accomplish. It's not like Chicago is a slouch because they used to be, but now that they're becoming more and more of a contender every year. So it's becoming more and more evident that the White Sox are going to be looked at as a potential World Series contender next year.
Yeah, and the work's definitely paying off. I mean, they've quietly made some inroads, and that's one of those things you have to do. I mean, another good comparable. We look at football. I mean, the White Sox are like the Bills. I mean, they've steadily made those investments the last several years. They've gone out and got good players, and from there, they've really built from within. They've worked through the draft, of course. They've worked through some free agency deals, and they've steadily built a good core of young players. And that's exactly what you're seeing with Chicago. That's what you're seeing with the Bills. There's a lot of comparables there, even though they're both in different sports.
Absolutely. And you know what I will say, too, is that I expect the Mets to be very active in the offseason this year. Because back in the day when the Wilpons were full-time owners, they used to barely spend any money. But now there's a different feel.
Yeah, they were beyond cheap.
I hated them with the passion, man. When the Mets were under the ownership of the Wilpons, they were so fucking cheap. They did not want to spend a dime on any superstar player. They were at one point interested in Bryce Harper, but of course, the Wilpons were like, no, it'll hurt our financial status, so we don't want to pay that kind of money for a legitimate World Series leading contender for Bryce Harper.
And you know what he could have done to the Mets had they actually gone with him? I mean,
Well,
it would have instantly improved them right off the bat.
absolutely. And plus, Bryce Harper alone would make the Mets a destination for free agents if he were to go to New York, which clearly he didn't do.
Right, exactly. And that's what the Wilpons don't understand, and that's what they didn't understand. You have to spend money in order to get good players. You have to spend money in order to attract good players. And basically, if you're going to be a cheap owner, guess what? The good players are going elsewhere. They're not coming to you.
No, they're not. And that's why a lot of people look at the Yankees, because the Yankees are one of the richest teams in the world. They don't have this issue. They don't have issues bringing in these players. They do, however, have issues with certain contracts, like Giancarlo Stanton. Giancarlo Stanton's contract is huge. But if anybody's contract is much bigger than his, it's freaking Garrett Cole's. He has the richest contract of any fucking pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, what the Yankees do every year, of course, they always pay the luxury tax, and there you go. Just like Boston.
But the problem with Major League Baseball is there's no salary cap.
Right. You can just spend whatever you want.
And that's why the Yankees have no issues with doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And a lot of times, I mean, it's definitely been a huge help for them.
But I think the thing for me would be, as far as the Mets are concerned, I think the best thing they would probably do if they're smart, depending who the GM is going to be, because I don't think the Mets don't have a general manager right now, but whoever they bring in, that guy better bring in Francisco Lindor, because he's been linked to the Mets all offseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be a great move. Absolutely great move. All right.
By a large shot.
Yeah. So what we'll do is actually, the next thing I was kind of thinking about, I know Sean usually would take this segment, but he's not here tonight, obviously. WWE News, The Undertaker retired.
Yeah, I just saw that Hot Ones episode not too long ago. And The Undertaker, look, I'm not a wrestling guy. I never have been. But The Undertaker was always one of those people that always seemed to kind of get people's attention to watch wrestling back in the day. So if you talk to me about any wrestling match, I wouldn't have a clue what you were talking about. It'd be like talking to a wall that's trying to dry off of paint. That's the relevancy I have for wrestling. It's like literally like 1% of what's going on.
Right. I mean, I will say this, having watched a lot of it back in the day when it was actually really popular and when everyone was talking about it, biggest things I remember about The Undertaker, well, one, he had some really good storylines, very believable storylines, even though, of course, everyone knows wrestling's fake, but very believable storylines. Him and William Moody, known as Paul Bearer, and now Moody's been dead for several years now, but him and Undertaker actually worked together extremely well. And Paul Bearer was actually, in true life, he was a licensed mortician. He was actually a licensed funeral director. So he could actually, the way that they made those storylines and into what they were, absolutely great. Undertaker was some of his stories where he was basically led the Ministry of Darkness and just some of the epic battles he's had. Of course, everyone that has seen wrestling remembers Hell in a Cell 1998 in Pittsburgh when he threw Mankind off the cage and then through the cage. And then basically from that point, Mankind ends up still fighting, and he ends up going for another 20 minutes in the ring, even with like punctured lung, busted ribs, and everything after taking the crazy bumps he did. And I mean, they definitely one of the most memorable matches I could think of. So for him to spend 30 years in the ring and finally decide to hang it up, he definitely earned that retirement. He did a lot of good stuff over the years.
Absolutely. And I find it interesting with wrestlers is that they don't act like this off the ring. And they're just normal human beings just like you and I. And they're very chill, too, with a certain amount of them. Like, if you watch that interview with The Undertaker on Hot Ones, you could tell he's a very genuine person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, here's a true story. Someone that was part of my team at Gander Mountain when it was still open, back in the early to mid 2000s. Back at that time, one of my friends, and I haven't talked to him in a while. I still do every so often, but his name's Eric. And one of the things I remember from him is he actually was a wrestler. He got in the ring, and he was one of those guys that kind of like to do the ECW thing. And that's just basically take some really crazy bumps and really go all out. And I think he was known as Omen or something like that. But what he would do, I remember a couple times he ended up walking into work, he was limping around a little bit, and I asked him, I was like, what happened? And he told me about how he took some chair shots to the back. He'd take a chair shot to the head when they were doing that. I remember one time he ended up getting his knee busted pretty good. I mean, there was a lot of crazy stuff he did, but if he never told you that, he's just a relaxed, chill guy like the rest of us. So definitely it's one of those things I remember. And actually, there was a time I met Mick Foley
That's cool.
Buffalo when he did his first book signing. And I remember this because it was at a Walmart on Niagara Falls Boulevard before the store shut down several years ago now. But I remember the line to get to the back of the store where he was signing everything. It was just absolutely insane. We were outside the door and probably took a good hour and a half to get back there. And that was his book, Have a Nice Day. And it was just really cool. Actually, I still have that. And then it was just a really interesting read of what happens in the ring and about what happens on the road. And a lot of these guys, I mean, yeah, they hate each other on TV, but in reality, I mean, these guys are like brothers and family on the road. I mean, that's what they do.
So, in other words, all of the acting for their rivalry back in the day, leading up to the modern age, is all fake, and they have a real relationship in real life, and they're good friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these guys are like roommates on the road. I mean, they'll spend time together. They'll drive from city to city, or they'll fly from city to city, and that's what they do. I mean,
yeah,
they spend time together just like regular families would.
Absolutely. We actually have some breaking news in the hockey world.
Okay.
And if you remember a little while back, yesterday, the Vegas Golden Knights put Max Pacioretty on the trade block.
Yes.
You've heard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently one team has called in so far, and that team is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the Penguins have called in, and they're asking for Max Pacioretty. But the question is, what exactly are you asking for? What would the Knights want in return from Pittsburgh if they're able to make the deal?
Wow. I hadn't really thought about it on their end, but I mean, the Knights are pretty good in terms of their roster overall right now. So it just kind of gets me thinking, like, what would you get in return for them?
The problem with Vegas is that they're way over the cap, and they have to get below it, or otherwise they. And I read this a little while back. Bill Daly said something very interesting when around the time they got off Pietrangelo. He said that if the Vegas Golden Knights do not get to the salary cap floor by the time the season starts, they're not going to be able to play.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's probably why they're so desperate to get rid of Pacioretty.
Right. I mean, they'll shed salary as much as they can.
I've also heard that the same thing could be said for Jonathan Marchessault.
Okay. Yeah, he's another one that's up there. So, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me either.
Look, the Knights are a good team in general. I just think that I think they spent a little bit too much money on players that they don't necessarily need.
Right. Well, that's true. I mean, look at who they've had the last, ever since their inception. I mean, they've had to trade away a lot of bad contracts. But then, as part of the expansion draft, to be good, when they ended up coming into the league, of course, that's what the teams did because the NHL wanted them to be competitive so quickly.
Yeah, basically. I mean, the same thing's going to happen with Seattle when they come into the league next summer, when they have the expansion draft. And I'm really interested in what exactly is going to be the case here, because I know that the Golden Knights have been exempt from the 2021 expansion draft. I know that for a fact because they're still a relatively new franchise. So that's why Vegas is not giving up anybody.
Right. I mean, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to the draft, but I have to say 2022, that's gonna be very interesting to see what happens, especially with some of the deals that will come around.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing I'm very excited about in 2022 already are two things. I'm ready for the Batman movie, and I am ready for the XFL.
Yeah, that would be nice to see that come back.
And speaking of the XFL, I've already heard a rumor that Steve Spurrier might be getting a head coaching opportunity when the new XFL comes back in 2022. It's going to be just like the previous one, where before Corona, it was going to be the season started a week after the Super Bowl, and then they get the crowds coming. I mean, it'll probably be full capacity by that point. So they'll do exactly what they did in this past year, where they have the games being played in February, and then they were supposed to have the championship game being played in late April around the time of the NFL draft. But the whole point I'm trying to bring up to this is Steve Spurrier. Do you remember him?
Yeah, I do, and I remember his short time in the NFL. And I mean, of course, everyone knows he's a great college coach. He didn't really do much with Washington back at the time, and then he ended up going back to the college game. And he's been one of those prolific college coaches who I always thought, in a lot of ways, he would get another shot as a head coach. He just never did.
Well, here's the thing. Here's where it leads up to. Steve Spurrier, there was an image that got leaked a little while ago, and he's wearing a Dallas Renegades T-shirt. And there's been some buzz that when the XFL does come back in 2022, whenever it is, Steve Spurrier is going to get an interest in a head coaching job for the Dallas Renegades, since Bob Stoops could come in as the head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners in college football in the NCAA. So I don't know what exactly is going to be the case for Bob Stoops, because I think Bob Stoops is a brilliant coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't know if he would want to go back to the XFL. But from what it sounds like, he may not go back. So that's probably why Steve Spurrier's name is being brought up in rumors lately for the XFL. However, I did know as well as that June Jones, who was the head coach for the Houston Roughnecks, very good coach, by the way, I've heard he may come back, but there's also been talk that he himself said on Twitter that he's not exactly sure, but he's definitely open to the idea of going back.
Yeah. I mean, time will tell, but I mean, Spurrier, great candidate. I mean, he definitely knows the game. It's just a matter of now he just needs to take the opportunity.
I think he would fit really well in the XFL, to be honest with you. I think he would fit really well with Dallas if he were to go there, or if he were to go to Tampa. Because let's put it this way. By the time the XFL comes back, I guarantee you there's going to be a handful of expansion teams across the XFL. And I'm pretty sure, too, that when they do have a handful of expansion teams, there's going to be more coaching opportunities, and there's going to be more players that would want to go play in the XFL and exceed their careers. I mean, look at P.J. Walker. P.J. Walker played for the Houston Roughnecks in February. He got a job. He got a contract by Carolina, and he performed really well a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even some of the people that go undrafted in the NFL draft, I mean, the XFL is another option for them now. I mean, now you have a second league that you can go to and still be able to go there and do great things. So, I mean, it absolutely is a good option. It's one that these coaching candidates should look at.
Well,
it would be interesting to see if Des Bryant ends up in the XFL, because it seems like some intervening powers do not want him playing in the NFL anymore.
I don't know about that. I mean, he was pulled aside on Saturday or Tuesday, yesterday, whatever it was, and he got pulled to the side, and he was like, "Okay, take a random positive test." He gets a COVID test, and he's like, "Oh, I'm positive. I have COVID." And then he starts acting like a white bitch on Twitter. He's like, "Oh, I got COVID. I'm not coming back." And then he's like, "Oh, my career is over." He's being a bitch at this point, to be honest with you. And he's always been
he tested positive prior to the game. That's why they pulled him to the side. He had to go take another test. But it just seems like there's, I mean, obviously, Des Bryant, an absolute, household name in the NFL and because of his time in Dallas. So it just seems like there's some sort of an intervening power that no longer wants him playing in the NFL. So it would, for somebody that clearly still wants to play football, it would definitely be interesting to see if he continues his career somewhere else like the XFL. Not saying it's going to happen. Not saying I have any sources or I can't see into the future. But it would be pretty cool if I could, though. But yeah, so I have nothing to say. I just think it would be interesting to see somebody of Des Bryant's, kind of stature in his history.
I think. Well, go ahead. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was just finishing up and saying it would be nice to see somebody like Des Bryant turn around and play in the XFL.
I mean, Des been doing pretty good in the XFL, at least in the new one in 2022.
Yeah.
It's kind of bullshit that I have to wait another 2 more years. Or actually, mathematically, it's kind of bullshit that I have to wait another whole calendar year just for the XFL to come back.
Right.
Yeah, as I say, around that time, that's gonna be wedding time for you, man.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because the spring of 2022 is when the XFL comes back, and that same year in July, I'm getting married.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh yay! What a fucking coincidence.
Enjoy being single for the last year and a half that you got, man.
Yep. Brittany, if you're watching this, sweetheart, I love you dearly.
Yeah. Until she beats your ass later.
Oh yeah. Oh, I deserve it.
Right.
But yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of information that came out about the XFL lately. So, I'm very excited about everything going around about the XFL, and then the NHL coming back soon, and then NFL playoffs is looking pretty good. But I have an interesting question for everybody. Who do you think, it doesn't have to be perfect, leading up to the playoffs, who do you guys see playing the Bills playing in the playoffs?
Wow.
Who do I think, at least for the first game, obviously making the assumption so I think it's honestly going to be between, and this depends. I don't know what the schedules are for either of these two teams. So if you guys have any knowledge about this, obviously that could change the answer. But right now it's Cleveland, and I think that Baker Mayfield has found kind of his stride. He's on his hot streak right now. Cleveland 9-3 for the first time since 94 or something like that. So, I mean, we're up there. I think we're supposed to be playing Cleveland right now. Kevin Stefanski, their head coach, I was a fan of the hiring. He was a smart coordinator in Minnesota where he was before Cleveland. I liked him. And the team is full of talent, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And they have a pretty good special teams unit put together too. So it would definitely be interesting to see Buffalo and Cleveland go at it. A little battle of the Lake Erie going on right there. But again, depending on how things shake out, I think you could also see us playing our old friend in Frank Reich and the Indianapolis Colts, who are also up there in the playoffs as well right now. So again, I think it really is going to depend on how Indianapolis and Cleveland play the rest of their season, obviously, as well as how we play the rest of our season going forward. But I think it's honestly going to come down to Cleveland or Indianapolis.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. I'm leaning towards it primarily being Cleveland is our first round matchup. And I'll tell you, Cleveland has really turned it on at the right time. And the thing that scares me right now about them is because they have some good receivers, but Mayfield, when he's on, he can be a very effective quarterback, and he is able to do some really solid things just like Allen would do. Where I think the Bills will have the number on Cleveland, though, is that we definitely have a better wide receiving core. Of course, Cleveland has no OBJ, so he's completely out of the picture at this point. But the other thing that I look at is that overall the defense that we have on the Bills is a better unit overall from what Cleveland has. So, I mean, there can be some interesting matchups. My concern on the Bills, though, is the run defense, as it has been all year, because the run defense has not been solid. And that has been a problem, especially in a couple of our games this season where we've blown big leads because of it. Now, the good thing is at least with what we had in the San Francisco game, the 49ers really didn't make any changes to the schemes. And what happened is that they kept playing the same zone coverages that they were using all week. And the problem that they ran into is then when they tried to go man-to-man, of course, we saw on that touchdown to McKenzie, they just got totally destroyed. I mean, man-to-man coverage did absolutely nothing for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah, so it really now it's just a matter of, who do I want to face? I mean, Cleveland would be a very tough test. I think if we were to get the matchup against Indianapolis, to Ryan's point, I think it's a more favorable matchup overall.
For me, I'm going to say there's a toss-up. I think Cleveland will lose to Pittsburgh down the road, which decreases their chances to play Buffalo. And I'm not scared of Cleveland. I'm really not scared of anybody because I'm always telling myself, you know what? If the Bills are proven to be winners and contenders for the Super Bowl, the least you could do is play any team. And that's what they're going to do. But here's my theory. I firmly believe there are two teams in the top of my head. It's not Cleveland. I'm going to say it's either the Indianapolis Colts or the Miami Dolphins. Because I firmly believe the Dolphins are in this position where they have a young team. Tua could be a decent quarterback. He still has room to grow. The Dolphins have a pretty solid defense. They got some solid weapons. They're very well coached. So the Dolphins have all these weapons, and they have all this talent, and they have a very good future ahead of them. And I have nothing but great things to say about the Dolphins' future prospectively. I mean, I hate them with a passion. But the Dolphins in general, they can compete with the Bills. They easily can. But Indianapolis, Indianapolis has been okay in the offensive game. But when it comes to the defense, it's been their strongest feature, in my opinion. I mean, Frank Reich is a good coach, but the Colts, to me, do not have the strength or the ability to beat a high-flying offense like Buffalo because of someone like Phillip Rivers. I mean, T.Y. Hilton's on his last leg at this point. He's pretty much said, I'm going to retire once the playoffs are over. And the Colts, I mean, just like the Dolphins, they have a good young team. But Miami, like I said, is much more in advance in their rebuild than Indianapolis is. But Indy still needs a QB after Phillip Rivers. And I don't know if Phillip Rivers will be able to pick up on that, to be honest with you. And I know this sounds stupid, but it's because he's been in Southern California for most of his career, and he's going to a town like Indianapolis, which they play in a dome. Yet, if they play the Bills in a wild card game in Buffalo, he'll be freezing his ass off.
Oh, yeah. And plus, he'll have rolling wins.
And I think that, that same argument can also be used for Miami when they come up here. I mean, when's the last time that Miami came up here to Buffalo in December? I mean, it's been a long time. We're usually, final game of the season, we're usually either in Miami during this time of the year or the Jets are in Buffalo. Or Buffalo is just somewhere out of town. So, I mean, I don't really know. I can't think off the top of my head when the last time Miami was in Buffalo. So, it'll definitely be an interesting final week matchup for sure. But to Bobby's point, the biggest crutch on defense for Indianapolis right now is Phillip Rivers. I mean, the amount of passes he has just not completed. They have a great number of running backs. In fact, any of their running backs could essentially be number one running backs on any team. Look at Nyheim Hines and how, the man is literally a number one running back, but he's like a third or fourth string right now in Indianapolis. I mean, that's how deep their running back room is. They do have some good wide receivers like Michael Pittman, who they just drafted this past year, who are going to end up coming in the next few years. Whether T.Y. Hilton continues playing after this year or not, really Phillip Rivers is the thing that's holding that offense back. So I'm, like Bobby said, I'm less scared of. I'm not really too worried about Indianapolis. But Tom, to your point about Cleveland too, obviously the run defense has been something that the Bills have struggled with, and that can probably be attributed to Starr not being on that line, holding that down for working against the run. But at the same time, the Bills have also not done great against the pass. They've done better than the run, but we've seen times where, passes are just not being defended, especially goal line passes. I mean, that literally before San Francisco and Mullins threw that pass in the end zone, last week. I think it was probably in the second quarter. I was like, why don't they just throw it? Like, why do you keep running it? Because we're not going to be able. And boom, immediately next play they threw it and scored that touchdown. So, from time to time, and that's because we play zone and we don't have the people for the man-to-man defense. So, again, each Pittsburgh proved it. Each week you can win. Each week you can lose in the NFL. And so I truly think that it will come down to personally, I think it'll come down to Cleveland and Indianapolis. But it would definitely be interesting to see Miami and Buffalo, or have it come down to Miami and Buffalo, because that's going to be a great game to watch in the final week. But then it would be great to see it again in the playoffs.
I don't know. For some reason, I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I was going to say about Miami, I'm surprised at their turnaround this year. And, I mean, they've really, really turned it up at the right time. And when they were taking some pretty nasty losses early on, we have to remember, if we were to face Miami in the playoffs, let's look back to early on in the season when they actually had the opportunity to beat us early on. It goes to say any team can win on any given day. It is definitely the truth. But Miami definitely has some weapons there. And they actually have a pretty good defense down there, but they have a really good running game at the same time. They have some strengths there. Quarterback, I mean, now that they're going with Tua, I mean, Tua has shown some flashes early on. But also keep in mind, he also ended up being out due to injuries. So whether or not that's going to play a factor, I mean, who knows? But Miami can be a very dangerous team. They're definitely one to keep an eye on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that they're set either way at quarterback, whether it's Fitzpatrick or whether it's Tua. I mean, you can throw obviously they're not the same quarterback, but I think that they're fine either way. I mean, they were winning games with Fitzpatrick. They were winning games with Tua. Their run game, Tom, like you said, it is good. It's not as good as it could be, though, because Myles Gaskin has been out. I don't know if you guys and those of you watching got a chance to see any of Myles Gaskin. He is a very small man, but he can literally get swallowed up by 5 defensive players and pop out on the other side. I mean, he's one of those. He's shifty, he's strong, he's powerful. He's absolutely amazing to watch.
He's a beast.
He is. And I'm certainly a fan of his as a person who in general is just a fan of football. I absolutely love Myles Gaskin enough to put him on my team. But obviously, as I said, he's been out. He did just get reactivated, though, so he should be ready to play hopefully by this weekend. And we'll see where he's at because he's been out for over 50% of the season now, I want to say. So they're strong at quarterback either way. They have a good run game. The problem is their receiving game. They're probably way more reliable with their tight ends, especially Gesicki. It seems that they're way more reliable with tight ends than they are wide receivers. But again, I don't watch enough Dolphins football to say one way or another. You know, there's a certain amount of passes that are dropped by the wide receivers that aren't by the tight ends. But I digress. And they have a strong defense. And I think that just goes to show Miami, Indianapolis, and then Cleveland with their new GM and new head coach are using the Buffalo method. They're building the exact same way Buffalo did under Beane and McDermott these last couple of years, and it's proving to work. All of them are pretty much proving to work. So I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see where all these teams end up. But it's interesting that we've said this before, and now these same teams are coming up in the conversation for who the Bills are going to be playing in the playoffs.
Yeah,
but
for
Bobby,
me, I was going to say, were you finished? I'm sorry.
No, I was finished. I was saying it's your time now.
Oh, I thought you were saying something like spectacular. But no, what I was going to say, I have 2 issues with the Miami Dolphins. The first one is, if you remember in the beginning of the year, they were doing a protocol on COVID players. If you remember, like Starley, do they opt out? All these players, CJ Mosley opt out, whatever. Miami's two-thirds of Miami's receivers opt out for the year. So they only had one starter, and then everybody else was basically practice squad receivers. And then they go out and they use Mike Gesicki. So that's why the Dolphins were relying on their tight ends more often than anybody throughout the season, because they know damn well that without Albert Wilson, without any of these guys, the only playmaker that's a receiver on Miami that's been playing on a consistent base is Devontae Parker. And Devontae Parker's been a beast all year. And another thing I want to say about the Dolphins is with Tua had an injury, yes. But if you look at Brian Flores, he benched him after that garbage performance during the Bills bye week against the Broncos a few weeks ago. And he basically said to him, all right, Tua, sit down. And then right after the game, he says, oh, he's our quarterback going forward. You don't think by any shapes of ways, like any way, shape, or form, you guys don't think that's like a little bit of a concern and shattering confidence for a young guy like that, specifically like Tua? Because I can certainly tell you Josh Allen never got that treatment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know that's going to set back confidence for Tua. I mean, Allen, of course, anytime he's had some rough outings, I mean, he's played through it and basically come back from the next game. I mean, look at what happened against Arizona when the team ended up losing on that last-second Hail Mary, which, of course, that was absolutely brutal to watch. But Josh Allen, the offense, everybody regrouped. When they had that loss against the Tennessee Titans where Allen did not have a good game, and when the offense just totally took a dump on the field, and basically it's like, oh, yeah, here you go. Well, defensively, we played like crap too, but the team rebounded. And basically, Allen has all the opportunities in the world. So the great thing is, I mean, yeah, it probably does affect confidence to a degree. Whether or not Tua takes it and runs with it, that's up to Tua. But I absolutely I like that point because it's like it shows the difference of how some of the coaches will handle that.
Yeah, the Dolphins are just a very interesting team. And if you look up the stats, 2/3 of the wins that Miami has throughout the year have come from Ryan Fitzpatrick, not Tua.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you look, if the playoffs were to start today, I guarantee you the Dolphins would probably use Tua than they would with Fitzpatrick. And plus, I guarantee you that if Fitzpatrick ends up retiring, the Dolphins are going to have to look for a backup. And for me, the Dolphins have a lot of room to grow. Like I said, they could very well be the second most competitive team in the AFC East next to Buffalo for years to come, because they're both relatively young. They both have bright coaches. They both have a stellar defense. So really, both of these teams are on the right path for success. But Miami, to me, to be honest with you guys, I'm really not sold on Tua at all. I'm not sold on him.
Yeah, me either. Just in a short time he's been in the league. I mean, he's had some good flashes, but to your point, I'm not sold on him yet. But the team as a whole, I could definitely see the Miami-Buffalo rivalry getting better over the next few years, because now with Miami getting much more competitive and of course the Bills getting a lot more competitive, you're going to have those really big games come up at crucial times in the season, and you'll probably have some playoff games coming up. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing that I didn't give enough credit for earlier in this conversation was Brian Flores. He's a smart coach. I think from the start, a lot of people said that he was the right coach for Miami, and I think that he's definitely proven that through some pretty hard times that the Dolphins have gone through with all their opt-outs, especially, Bobby, like you pointed out, in the wide receiver core. And then obviously, you have a young quarterback who your team is essentially taking a chance on, because you don't know if he's going to go out there and, he's risking major injury that he had experienced before when he was in college. So I definitely didn't give the props that are definitely well-deserved to Brian Flores. But yeah, just the Dolphins have seemed to have done the Buffalo rebuild in such a fast way. And like we said, a lot of their players did opt out. So we're not even looking at a fully realized, Dolphins team. So it's definitely something to look forward to over the next couple of years. But I have a topic for a little bit later. I don't know what the exact set is for tonight, but I definitely have something that I want to kind of branch off of this. But we
You might as well just share it if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you guys what your thoughts were on some of the vacancies or some of the assumed vacancies around the NFL are for GM and head coach. I say assumed because some people who should be fired,
Adam Gase, number one,
not yet been fired from their job, but I do think that this is certainly. I do think that this is certainly going to be an interesting offseason because I think a lot of names that are being brought up for possible head coaching jobs are not going to leave the positions that they're in. And I think that there are some teams where you will see something that doesn't typically happen where I think one position will go and one position will not go. So I definitely wanted to see if we could talk about that and have a conversation about that.
Absolutely, we definitely can. So the question is what? Which team will have the best vacancy available, or like what's the question?
Not necessarily the best vacancy, but just who do you think is going to go? Which teams that do have vacancies? Do you have any people in mind that you think are definitely going to go certain places? And then also teams that don't have vacancies yet, where people are on the hot seat. Do you think that they're going to be given another year? Do you think are they going to be cut this year at the end of the year? And what your thoughts are about some of those, because I obviously I have thoughts on them because I wanted to talk about them, but wanted to hear what other people thought, and so maybe some of the people in the comments and those watching can get in on this too.
Well, first off, I just want to say Adam Gase is going to get fired pretty soon.
Yeah, we all agree on that.
Listen, if he doesn't sell the Jets, put the organization in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and blow them up.
Yeah.
Because they do not deserve to be in the NFL if they keep Adam Gase around.
Oh my God! Imagine they keep him after all this bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that would be horrible.
11 start. I mean, come on.
Yeah, right. But to Ryan's question, I think if anybody would be available for a head coaching position, there are a few rumors, and one I constantly hear all the time is Bill Cowher. And Bill Cowher might come out of retirement, and just specifically because Boomer Esiason brought this up on WFAN earlier the week, and he stated that Bill Cowher may leave CBS and go to return to coach in the NFL. And if there was a team that was available for him to coach, it would be the New York Jets.
Yep.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I don't really see any sort of sensory coming from it, because if that were true in any way, shape, or form, Bill Cowher should have never retired after the Steelers won the Super Bowl 15 years ago. And that's just me. So what makes people think that Bill Cowher wants to come out of retirement now? Because to me, his style of coaching in terms of football is outdated. So you need a faster pace in the NFL, and Bill Cowher doesn't present that. So if I'm going to say who I personally think the New York Jets, of all people, because I live in this shithole. I live in Jets country. So people have always said to me, oh, go get Bill Cowher. Oh, go get this guy. Go get him. Go get that. Go get this college coach. But there's one name a lot of people that have disagreed with me on this, and I'm like, don't even be surprised if his name even comes up. And that name is Bill O'Brien. I would not be shocked one bit if the Jets looked into him.
That actually, I was going to bring that up, and that's a good point, because he's definitely one of the people I was thinking of right off the bat. Bill O'Brien gets another job next year, I think. Cowher, I'm like so on him. I think if the opportunity is right and you have a good team that wants to go for him, absolutely it could happen. I don't see him going to the Jets whatsoever.
No.
But there's two things I can think of right off the bat. Number one, for Atlanta, I think Raheem Morris will get the actual permanent title, because he has actually helped the Falcons come back and have somewhat of a respectable season, and he has turned a lot of things around for them. So I do think that absolutely that could happen. The other thing I'm also thinking of is, don't be surprised if Greg Roman gets a head coaching job.
I don't know. I don't like that idea at all. But, I mean, and I actually have a list of names right here for the Jets, because, again, I have two friends who I worked with over the summer who are just just go queer for the Jets, and they praise everything they do. It's ridiculous, to be honest. And I'm the only Buffalo Bills fan in there. So some of the names that have been brought up are Joe Brady, the Panthers offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, which one has been named for quite a lot lately. He's the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. Brian Dable's name has been brought up. Colts defensive coordinator Matt Elvelis has been brought up. Arthur Smith, the Titans offensive coordinator, has been brought up. Brandon Staley, he's the Rams defensive coordinator. Wake Forest offensive coordinator Scott Turner and Wake Forest head coach Matt Campbell's been brought up. Giants defensive coordinator Patrick Graham and Browns defensive coordinator Joe Woods are all names that are available.
Right.
But yeah, and then I also heard at one point, I don't know how accurate it is, I also heard the Houston Texans might take a look at Adam Gase.
Why? Why?
Because they're
Houston, do you have a death wish?
It basically is a death wish. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, they'd be better off at looking at 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, honestly.
Robert Saleh. Sorry,
He's a solid defensive coordinator. He's a good coach.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, so I don't know if you guys heard this, but legislators in Michigan wrote the Ford family first, thanking them for firing Matt Patricia, and the GM up there, and then also in the same letter urging the Ford family to hire Saleh from San Francisco to make him the head coach in Detroit.
The problem with that is that what the Lions are trying to do here is tampering. You can't do that while there's still an active coach on the current roster in the NFL. I mean, that's just.
Yeah,
I can.
No, it's not the Lions. It's lawmakers so representatives and senators in Michigan wrote a letter to the Ford family who owns the Lions and said, this is who we want you guys to bring in as a head coach in the offseason, which is interesting. I've never heard of that happening before.
I have no faith in what the Lions do at all. Nothing.
I wouldn't even know the damn state legislature, but that's for a whole different topic.
My thing, I had also heard the discussion. I didn't hear it on Boomer's show. I caught a clip of it. Rich Eisen talked about it today on his show. And he's the way that he explained it is that Cowher said that the only team that he would come out of retirement for would be the Jets. So it's not just any team. It's specifically the Jets. And to Bobby's point, the first thing I thought that popped into my mind when this was mentioned was he hasn't coached in the NFL for a long time. I immediately thought of NFL coaches in like the three-piece suits and the rain jackets and like the fedoras. Like that's how far. I know that he wasn't part of that generation, but that's the image that popped into my mind when I thought about Cowher coming out of retirement and coaching again. But the reasoning that Rich Eisen laid out made sense. He doesn't have to move. He's already in New York because of CBS.
Yep.
Yes.
He gets Trevor Lawrence more than likely, unless somehow Gase decides to bungle the entire Jets season, win out for the rest of it, and he ends up playing in Jacksonville, which would be the second worst location he could possibly go to. But it makes sense that if Cowher was going to come out of retirement for any team, it would be the Jets because he's already in New York. He doesn't have to move. He knows the media because he was the media in New York, and he gets a generational talent in Trevor Lawrence. Now, again, that goes back to the discussion of can he adapt to the new ways of the NFL? He hasn't been in an NFL locker room in so long. Would he be able to do it? And I think it would definitely be interesting to see. But that being said, the most interesting hot seat issue when it comes to head coaches and GMs is the Chargers. Because I think Anthony Lynn probably gets fired in the offseason. But I think that Tom Telesco, the GM, I think he stays. Because the talent is there. in the Chargers organization.
Oh, no question. They have a great run game. They have a good defense. It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
they've had a lot of clock mismanagement, and a lot of that comes down to the coaching.
Yeah. I mean, they asked the media, a reporter asked Anthony Lynn, like, why didn't you, like, what happened to the clock management? Why didn't you take a timeout? And he literally said, I don't know. I mean, that's just poor coaching. Now, could they keep Lynn for at least another year? Probably. No. That's also the word on the street, is that they probably could do that because it's Herbert's first year, and that was the head coach when they brought Herbert into the organization. But to my point, I don't see them firing the GM, Tom Telesco, because he brought in Herbert, who is clearly a good quarterback and will continue to develop as a good quarterback. They have a great run game. They have good backup running backs, and then obviously Austin Eckler, if he can stay healthy, is a fantastic number one. They have some decent wide receivers. They have Hunter Henry at tight end, so clearly their offensive game is there. And they have decent defense. Obviously, there's areas that you're always going to need to improve in. So I don't see them firing the GM, which it happens sometimes, but how often does one go and the other doesn't? You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying that the Chargers are definitely going to be the most interesting, because on the front office side of things, they clearly have it together. It's just Anthony Lynn is a head coach, has some shortcomings that are potentially going to lead to his firing. Now, the Chargers did say that they were going to give it till the end of the year. But this is also, and I don't know if you guys heard this, before losing last week.
Yes, I've heard this.
Before losing last week, the week before, when they were still mathematically able to make the playoffs, he told the players in the locker room, like, it's not going to happen this year. Just give up, like, just basically give up. Like, it's not going to happen this year. The playoffs aren't going to happen this year. We're not going to be in the hunt. And that was when they were still mathematically in the playoffs. And then they go out the next week, lose, are mathematically eliminated. So it's just, do they want to keep that type of a head coach around who, when you're still in the playoffs, is like, or like you still potentially could be in the playoffs, is basically telling you, like, pack it up, go home, not even, we're going to play for our jobs type of a thing. Like, we're just going. So I personally pinpoint to the Chargers as my thing, as like my team to watch, because I think it's certainly interesting that they could fire the head coach but keep the GM, because that typically doesn't happen. You usually lose both or neither.
I mean, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how Bill Cowher is going to be able to adapt into the modern age of NFL football. I mean, look at John Gruden with the Raiders. He got this massive contract. He owns 10% of the team, and they can't get rid of him. And God forbid they're shit for the next 10 years. John Gruden has been a terrible head coach for the Raiders so far. He really has been. He's got the players, but he can't formally what's the word I'm looking for? He can't relate to the modern NFL. He just can't do it. He's an old school football coach. And the same argument can be said for Bill Cowher. So I don't know why that the Jets think it's a good idea to bring in a old style coach like Cowher. I mean, I get the idea because they want to bring in a Hall of Famer coach to bring in Trevor Lawrence and have him develop into an NFL quarterback. But the problem with Bill Cowher is he's running into a situation, if he agrees to be the Jets head coach within a month from now, if he becomes the coach, he's going to be in a situation where they have Mekhi Becton, and yet everybody else around them is so trash. But then yet they already ruined Sam Darnold. But then yet they bring in another quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. So the only thing I give Joe Douglas credit for is the fact that he's able to get all these draft picks, he's able to bring out some salary in some of these players, and most of all, he's also got a shit team to thank for Adam Gase for keeping him out for this long and just tanking. So the point I'm trying to make is I don't know how that's going to relate with Bill Cowher as far as having him to be relating to the modern player, because his era of NFL football, those days are done. You need a fast tempo player in the NFL, and the New York Jets could provide it, but I don't know how he's able to establish that.
Right. And as much as I like Bill Cowher, and I definitely have a lot of respect for him over the years for what he did with the Steelers, my concern, just like you're saying, is adapting to the modern game. And John Gruden has been a total failure at that. I mean, yeah, he's won some games with Vegas, but he has not done anything special. He hasn't done anything special with them. Instead, actually, what happens is he ended up gutting a fairly okay Raiders team before they ended up doing the move. Totally changes the defense to a system that Gruden likes, which actually went against what was actually working. And then, of course, I mean, you have a almost non-existent run game. I mean, they're fairly decent, but you're not getting a complete team, and just the way that he handles the players is not great. Good point. AB, look what happened. We all saw that. So, I mean,
yeah, but
it's just a lot of the old school coaches, I fail to see in a lot of ways how they're gonna adapt completely to the current game. Now, the newer coaches you have, for example, I mean, look at what Morris has done in Atlanta in the time he's taken over. He's changed that team around fairly well. McDermott, proof is in the pudding right there. I mean, now he's in his in the time that he's been here and what he's been able to do with Josh Allen and completely change the culture around and have one of the best teams that we have in the NFL right now. A lot of these younger coaches get it. They understand what the current players are looking for. That's the way that they should really go. And what I'm thinking is that the Jets would be better served, especially in their case, if they're getting rid of Gase, is that they really need to look into someone that's going to build that culture and relate to a player, but at the same time, demand excellence out of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly into what I was going to say. If you're going to go – first off, I don't think that Darnold is necessarily broken. I think if you were to get Darnold into a positive environment with the right head coach, I think he would turn out to be a decent franchise quarterback somewhere else. Just like I also think that I think they're probably a little bit late on this, but I feel like if you go back a year, if you got Rosen into the right environment, you built an actual team around him, he could have been a decent quarterback for a team for a few years. I think if you're going to end up going 0-16, getting the first overall pick, and drafting Trevor Lawrence, I think you go get Eric Bieniemy. I think you sell your soul to go get Eric Bieniemy, who, even though his history is mainly as a running backs coach, both in college and the NFL, the man's been the offensive coordinator for Patrick Mahomes. He comes from the Reid coaching tree. He can build that culture that they've built in Kansas City. He can help guide the rebuild in terms of what they need to put around a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. And then obviously he's, as the OC in Kansas City, he's had a role in developing Mahomes and what little development you need to give a generational talent like Mahomes. So I think it just makes sense that out of all of the candidates that are possibly out there, now again, we are talking about the Jets. So chances are they go get a defensive guy, like they're gonna go hire Matt Patricia tomorrow or some shit like that.
Oh my God! That's a disaster.
They're gonna end up tanking, and we're gonna end up having to cut that little swath of New Jersey out, push it down the river and out to sea into the Atlantic, because that's just what the Jets do. But if the Jets were to be smart, they go and get Eric Bieniemy, a guy who's been around Patrick Mahomes for the past couple of years, who has won a Super Bowl, and who can guide the Jets into what they need to do to be successful. Again, though, it is the New Jersey Jets, and they probably most definitely will not do that, and they're going to be trash and a dumpster fire for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Oh God, if you were to get Matt Patricia, you would be eaten alive by the New York media.
Yeah,
if they get Matt Patricia, I will go buy a Sam Darnold jersey tomorrow. I would do it.
Oh, I know you would. The thing with me with the Jets is I think Joe Douglas has too big of an ego to make the right decisions. I know he's trying his best to be an NFL GM, but a lot of the moves he's been making have not panned out. I give him credit for going out and getting someone like Mekhi Becton, and he's going to make a Pro Bowl. I like Mekhi Becton, and he's one of the few players who I think would be an eligible guard in the league. So he's doing really well. Denzel Mims is another one. But the thing is with Trevor Lawrence, it doesn't matter what you do with him. I mean, look at Joe Burrow. The Bengals have no offensive line. They already ruined him by tearing his ACL and his PCL. And by the time Joe Burrow comes back from his injury, he's not going to be the same player. And the same thing could happen with Trevor Lawrence. You never know. And
right.
yet Jets fans are so deluded they really believe the Jets are going to be instant contenders like that just because they're going to get Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
That's
not going to happen.
Like they're so fucking delusional. I mean, you don't see Bills fans say, "Oh, I'm so excited to watch Josh Allen his first year go to the fucking Super Bowl." No, it took a couple of years for Josh Allen to get to where he is, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. It's amazing to watch his development. But Jets fans are so deluded because it's a big market in New York, and that yet he wants to go to the Jets. But there's a thing. Trevor Lawrence does not have to go to the Jets. He could say, "I want to declare for the NFL draft, but I don't want to play for the New York Jets."
Mm-hmm.
That's a very strong possibility. He could very well pull off a John Elway or an Eric Lindros. There's a very good chance.
Or Ryan Leaf, actually, for that matter.
A what?
Or Ryan Leaf back when he ended up getting drafted to San Diego.
Well, Ryan Leaf is one of the biggest busts of all time, but he didn't contemplate about not playing for the Chargers. He just straight up said, "I'm going to play for the Chargers." Unless you're thinking of Eli Manning.
Yeah, I might be thinking about that because I remember he wanted to go to New York.
Well, no, Eli Manning didn't want to play for the Chargers. And that's what, of course, Phillip Rivers got drafted by the Giants, and he got traded for Eli Manning.
Because they drafted Manning, then drafted, and then traded.
Yeah, that was an odd year for me, for football is concerned. But it does happen. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trevor Lawrence looked at the New York Jets and said, "I don't want to play for that shithole. They have too big of an egomaniac as a general manager who's trying to do the right thing, but yet it doesn't seem like to know what he's doing." And yet, my favorite thing about Jets fans is they really believe they're going to get Allen Robinson or Juju Smith-Schuster. They really believe that.
Doubt it. I mean,
No, now that the Steelers, the only conversation about Juju, and I understand the conversation because, again, I lived in Pennsylvania for 4 years. All of my friends and my roommates from then are Steelers fans. The only conversation that existed about Juju leaving was the fact that the Steelers are essentially strapped for cash. And they're even more so now that COVID has hit. But now that Bud Dupree, who was on a franchise tag this past year, is out for the year with his injury, they can give him they're just going to let him go in the offseason. So that's saved money. I'm sure that they're going to cut a couple of other guys. They'll be able to afford and to pay Juju the money that he's owed. Now, that said, do you guys want to piss off everybody in the comments really quick? Because I think what I have to say in this, it will certainly piss people off. For each of us right now, your top 2 MVP candidates for the NFL this year. Top 2.
Top 2. I'm going to say.
Mine will piss people off.
I'm going to say for my number 1, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. And then the other one, that's tough. There's a lot of good ones. You could throw Josh Allen in there. You could throw in T.J. Watt. There's a lot of good players, man.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson's always up there.
Lamar Jackson's not as good as he was last year. I'll say that. He's definitely not in that conversation. I want to throw in Aaron Donald. I really do. But I don't know if he deserves it like the previous years. But, I mean, if I'm picking one, it's definitely Patrick Mahomes. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm going to put Aaron Rodgers in there.
Okay.
We can do top 3. We can do like your top 3. That's fine. Because even then, my top 3 is still going to piss a lot of people off.
Right.
All right, fine. All right, then it's Mahomes, Allen, and Rodgers. But actually, no, it's Mahomes, Rodgers, then Allen. That's my top 3.
Okay. I would say if I'm looking at top 3 altogether, including like any positions, I would say Mahomes is definitely up there. Claypool definitely is playing up there. And then if I had to go for a third player, I honestly would say Allen is there. I mean, if he keeps up what he's doing, he is definitely MVP level.
You already dethroned Russell Wilson.
Yep.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Allen being up there. My 3 is going to piss a lot of people off.
Just say it.
I'm excited that it's going to piss a lot of people off. This is in no particular order, by the way. I think my top 3 for MVP in the NFL right now is obviously Josh Allen. Aaron Rodgers absolutely deserves to be in the conversation. and Russell Wilson. I don't think Patrick Mahomes is in the top 3 conversation for me.
Really?
Really? Why?
I think that the talent around – I'm not saying by any means that Patrick Mahomes is not a good quarterback. He is a generational talent. All the respect in the world to the man. The man just won the Super Bowl. There is too much talent offensively, alone offensively, but on both sides of the ball. But alone offensively, there's too much talent on the offensive side of the ball to make him the most valuable player. There's too much offensive talent at running back, at wide receiver, at tight end, the offensive line. There is too much high-powered offensive talent on the Kansas City Chiefs to make a legitimate argument. Now, this is me. The chances are Patrick Mahomes is going to be the MVP. Now, this is just me looking at it from an outside-of-the-box standpoint. There's too much talent. If you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, you have Travis Kelce, who is the best tight end in the league. Your offensive line makes you pretty much untouchable. You have the best, or if not, top 2 or 3 of the wide receivers in Cheetah right now, in Tyreek Hill. You also have oh no, never mind. He's not on that team anymore. But you have at all positions, when Sammy Watkins is healthy, Sammy Watkins is good on that team. There's too much offensive talent on that team. Now, if you go back 1 year, absolutely Mahomes is in the MVP conversation. Absolutely, I say number 1 without a doubt. He's the MVP. But you now have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You now have Le'Veon Bell. You now have Tyreek Hill. You have Travis Kelce. You have an offensive line that makes you untouchable. I don't see how you can say he's the most valuable player on his team. Again, absolute generational talent. But you're looking at Josh Allen, who is playing with almost no run game because Devin Singletary has 1 touchdown on the year. Zach Moss has been decent, but outside of that, you have no run game. Your tight ends have been inconsistent as hell. You have one of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL, no doubt. You have 4 good wide receivers on this team at any given time, between Brown when he's healthy, Beasley, Gabriel Davis is coming into his own, and then obviously Stephon Diggs. But then the defense has been inconsistent. They are definitely not the top 3 defense we've seen in the past couple of years. And so you're seeing more opportunities being taken on the offensive side of the ball. So Allen is certainly in the conversation. Aaron Rodgers is playing the best football of his life. Man's breaking records left and right. He's going to keep playing for another decade. He's the healthiest he's ever been. And he's playing without top-tier wide receivers because Devontae Adams has been out for most of the season. Aaron Jones is really the only running back that he has on that team. And the defense is decent, but, I mean, there's nothing stand out about the Green Bay defense. And then you turn around and the Seattle Seahawks defense is absolutely garbage, does not exist, but that's because the players that they have do not fit the scheme on their defense at all. Jamal Adams should not be on the Seattle Seahawks. And he's essentially been without some top, like Chris Carson. He's been without Chris Carson for the last couple of weeks because he's been out with injuries. So I think, and so Russell Wilson has essentially put that entire team on his back and won most of the games for the season. So if you're talking about most valuable player, you're looking at Aaron Rodgers, you're looking at Josh Allen, and you're looking at Russell Wilson. Again, my opinion.
So
probably not going to happen. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, fair enough, but that's what I don't understand. So let me get this straight. You don't think Patrick Mahomes is worthy of the MVP conversation because he has too many weapons. Yet Russell Wilson has weapons, but yet the defense is so hot trash. But maybe that's what killed his availability. He's been struggling in the second half of the season. I mean, games against like Buffalo and Seattle, Arizona, and then just recently against the goddamn Giants to fucking Colt McCoy, who hasn't touched the football in 5 fucking years.
Yeah, and the Giants pull it out.
I think that the players that are on the offensive side of the ball for the Chiefs outweighs the fact that, like I said, DK Metcalf has been way more consistent as a wide receiver, but he's been without Chris Carson. He's been without some of the offensive players that are on his side of the ball. And then you also have to take into account the fact that that team was on his back for so long. The man's probably got to be tired of it. He's going to be hurting a little bit. So I think just based on his first half of the season performance, he certainly deserves to be in the conversation for it. Will he get it? Probably not. Again, realistically, I think it's probably going to be Mahomes. But if you're looking at it holistically, you're looking at Russell Wilson. If I had to put it in order, it's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers and then Allen and then Russell Wilson. For me personally. But if you're realistically looking at it, Patrick Mahomes is definitely going to be number one on most everybody's list and is probably going to get the MVP. And if Aaron Rodgers is not second behind him, that's an absolute travesty. And most of those people don't watch football anyways.
It's just interesting with that discussion because when you think about it, I would have said the same thing about Aaron Rodgers. When you look at Aaron Rodgers, he's got Devontae Adams, he's got Aaron Jones, he's got Allen Lazard. The Packers overall have a good offense. They're good enough to win almost every single game. Their defense, however, is a dumpster fire, just like Seattle. But Aaron Rodgers knows that he's on his last year with the Packers, and he's gone by the end of next year. And that's why he's playing lights out at this point. And for me, Aaron Rodgers is just trying to show the Packers, hey, you drafted a quarterback last April. You should have gotten me a wide receiver. So for making me do this to you guys, I'm going to go out and perform to the best of my ability, and I'm going to put myself in the MVP caliber conversation because of my just a general performance throughout the entire year. And the way the Packers structured for years by Aaron Rodgers, it's not like he's carrying the team by himself. He's got good offensive weapons around him, if not one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. So Aaron Rodgers has all of the talent in the world to compete to where he is now. But it's just that defense is what's holding him back.
Well, so my argument against that would be I honestly don't think – the issue with the Packers is that they're a publicly owned team, right? So there's not really a true owner that can kind of have sway over what the GM does. I honestly don't think we've seen the last of Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I honestly do not. It would be interesting if we do, but I honestly believe that he probably gets a contract extension at the end of this year. But here's my argument. Here's my argument against him having all the weapons in the world. Lazard out for how long with the core surgery?
Like 4 games. Season. Like 4 games.
Devontae Adams has been inactive more than he's been active this season, which really just leaves him with Aaron Jones. In some games, Aaron Jones wasn't even showing up. Now, that was 1 or 2 games throughout the season. But if you're really working with Aaron Jones, I don't know what his actual name is, but I'll use the acronym that everybody's using, MVS. I think it's like Valdez or Scaldez or something like that.
Marquez Vandal-Scantling. That's what you're thinking of.
So he did step up as a wide receiver. He definitely stepped into his own. But, again, Lazard was out for a good portion of the season, just as he was getting hot with core surgery. Devontae Adams has been inactive more than he's been active. So he's had some guys that have stepped up, certainly, and then obviously Aaron Jones that's been present there. And I think Aaron Jones missed a game or two, I want to say, at some point in the season. But that's my argument against that, because those weapons haven't been available to him throughout the entirety of the year, unlike in Kansas City. Those weapons have been available to Mahomes all year, and then they added more weapons on top of that, right? Bell was added in the beginning of the season. So they continued to do that. So that's my argument against it. Again, realistically, though, coming back down off of my high horse to reality, Patrick Mahomes is probably going to be the NFL MVP for the year. I wouldn't be surprised if he is also hoisting another Lombardi above his head in just a short while here too. So, but I just wanted to piss everybody else off in the comments and see what you guys had to say.
Well, I don't think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl every year. There has to be a new champion at some point. But, I mean, I'm not saying that Kansas City can't win. They definitely can. But
I
there
think
are.
they'll definitely win.
Hmm?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think that they're definitely going to win this year. I think by all means, they are way too high-powered of a team to not win this year.
I mean, that's very possible. I mean, the Chiefs are that good. But you never know. They might get the second seed, which I'm really starting to doubt at this point that they'll stay in that second seed. That might go to Pittsburgh. But if Kansas City plays to what they're up to right now at, like, what is it, 12-1 they're at right now? 11-1?
Yeah, I think it's 11-1 right now.
Well, if they go 15-1, okay, then they'll get a first-round bye. And then Pittsburgh will play Indianapolis or whoever gets that last spot. So we'll find out down the road exactly what's going to happen. Because I did say earlier on the show that I don't think Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to win a Super Bowl every year. I mean, I know that's the plan and that's the goal, but there's going to be a lot of teams that could potentially play up to them. And a lot of analysts, if you want to call them that, on ESPN and all these other newscasters were all saying that if there was a team that could go toe-to-toe with Kansas City for the Super Bowl run, it's Buffalo.
Very true. And
yeah, they are 11-1.
Pretty well, usually when they've gone up against them.
Yeah, we almost beat them earlier in the season this year. I mean, it was definitely a close game. Buffalo is certainly I think when it comes to games like when you play against Kansas City, it comes down to coaching and it comes down to execution. But we almost beat them. Buffalo is certainly poised and built to win games against teams like that. And to answer your question, yes, the Chiefs are 11-1. So they're currently tied with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that they're better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think anybody who looks at all the factors knows that they're better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh has what, the 30th something easiest schedule in the league?
Yeah.
Pittsburgh?
Yeah. I mean, they've been barely squeaking by bad teams, and then they barely lose to the Washington football team. I mean, yeah, the record is 11-1. That's undisputable. And prior to that, they were undefeated, and undefeated is undefeated in the NFL. You can't argue against that, but the crashing coming home to reality is you played the shittiest teams. Now, granted, Kansas City has also had an easy schedule throughout the year. Playing, the teams combined that they played have had, a losing record, or combined is still a losing record. But I think you look at the two rosters and you say, there's more holes on the Pittsburgh side of this roster than there are on the Kansas City. There are not many holes that you can find on the Kansas City side of that roster.
Yeah, they're pretty well stacked. I mean, very good. Very good.
No idea how they afford all of these players. No idea how they afford all of them. The cap does not exist for Kansas City, apparently. But yeah.
That's for sure. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about, or are you looking to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think I'm good. We went a little over 2 hours. I mean, it's, pretty solid week. So, the biggest thing I would say is definitely tune into that Sunday night game with Pittsburgh versus Buffalo. You're going to see a lot of interesting things in that game. And I'll tell you, I think it's going to come down to a battle of the defenses. And, we're going to see a little bit of everything. So I'm thinking, let's see, if I had to make a prediction on it, I think Buffalo by 3, because I think a little bit more overall. I think we're a little more well-rounded in terms of what we can do in all three phases of the game. And I think we're a little bit stronger with special teams. We've got a little bit, we have like a Roethlisberger-type quarterback in Josh Allen, so that works out well. But the fact that our defense played lights out last week, I expect the same thing this week. And when you're putting San Francisco on a goal line stand and you do it multiple times in a game, I totally think it's possible. So I'm gonna go Buffalo by 3 in this game.
Yeah, I don't make predictions, but I forgot to mention one topic is that Logan Paul is expected to fight Floyd Mayweather on February 20th as an exhibition.
I did see that earlier this week.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to play out, but I don't make predictions.
Get obliterated?
He probably will. I mean, Floyd's probably going to destroy him anyway. So, so that's...
Dog is commentator again.
Yeah, probably.
Stuck in there and commentating the fight.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, I don't make predictions for football games. I'm just gonna say I just hope it's a close one. That's all I hope for.
Yeah, I don't typically make predictions either, but Tom, it sounds like yours is probably more correct. I honestly don't think it's going to come down to defenses. I think it's going to come down to special teams. It's going to come down to kicks. In Buffalo, by all means, in all of special teams, has a better kicking and punting unit than the Steelers do. So really, it's going to be punting the ball and getting good placement, and then also making more kicks than the Steelers do.
Definitely.
So I think that my 3 is definitely pretty accurate.
Definitely.
Awesome. So, yeah, with that being said, we'll wrap up for another week, of course. Everyone that was watching on Facebook tonight and all the comments, thank you guys for watching it. We appreciate it. We had a pretty good turnout tonight. I mean, we, from what I'm showing here, we had over 250 watching at one point. So we had a pretty decent night, and, everyone that was on here, we appreciate it. So basically with that, for Ryan, Bobby, myself, have a good rest of your week. Take care of yourself and each other. We'll see you next time.